I'm Jamie Seeker, and this is What It Takes. Each episode, I sit down with real business owners to talk about their journey, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Today's guest is someone who wears a lot of hats and wears them with purpose. Amber Sheikh, did I say that right?
You did, yes.
I did. I asked and then I saw it and I'm like, let me just verify this real quick. Amber Sheikh is the founder and CEO of Chic Impact, a powerhouse nonprofit consulting firm based in LA. Through her business, she's helped countless mission-driven organizations across California strengthen their fundraising, their leadership, and their strategic planning, which we'll be talking about today. So she does this all while making sure communities that need the most support stay at the center of the conversation. But Amber's work doesn't stop at her company's doors. She's also deeply involved in public service, appointed to LA City Harbor Area Planning Commission by former Mayor Eric Garcetti. How do you say his last
Marcetti,
name?
yeah.
Garcetti. And now serving as chair of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority Commission. She's also a mom of two, a first generation American, and a true advocate for building systems that actually serve people. So, in this episode, we're talking about what it takes to lead as a woman in public life. And we're dipping into a topic that every founder needs to get serious about, and that's business strategy. So, Amber's going to share how she built her company, what planning looks like in the nonprofit space, and how she helps her clients and her own team prepare for sustainable growth. So, welcome, Amber, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. Anytime I get to talk about all the things I love in one place, I get excited.
Yes, yes. So, for those of you who don't know yet, how do you describe who you are and then what you do?
Yeah, it's so interesting because who I am and what I do are very closely related. And I'm sure we'll get into this at some point because some of my survival as a business owner has actually been trying to separate those over time.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, that's
but
good.
What I do by day is run an incredible consulting firm for all charitable organizations, for nonprofits. So I lead this team of people that are way smarter than I am, in helping charitable organizations kind of fill in the gaps in what they're traditionally not good at, but my team is really good at. So most people start a nonprofit or work at a nonprofit because they care about the mission, they have lived experience, or there's something that they're really focused on for that population or that cause. And what they're typically not good at or don't have a lot of training in is like how to run a nonprofit, how to raise money, how to make sure you're impactful, all of those things. And that's what our team does really well. And we're focused on that and we're obsessed with that, basically.
I
So,
love that.
it's,
And I
yeah,
can,
focus on that. We do that.
yes, I fully can get behind that concept because that's really what my company is all about, Seeker
Right.
Solution as well. So there's a lot of similarities there. So take us back to the beginning. I want to hear your origin story. I know how I started and how I kind of came about that, but how did Chic Impact come to be? What was going to be on your life work that like led you to start your own consulting firm?
Yeah, so I'm going to take us back a bit. Actually, in college, while studying abroad, I worked abroad in Delhi, New Delhi, India, and I worked in poverty alleviation and microfinance. And it was there that I always thought I wanted to do international relief work. And this is partially because both my parents are immigrants. I spent a lot of time going abroad as a kid and saw kind of widespread poverty and was like, there's got to be something we can do about this. But while working in poverty alleviation, I realized that the organizations doing the work, I don't know how to say this, like sucked kind of at like running their own organization. They were really good at doing the work, but when it came to a strategic plan or even making payroll or doing any of these things to keep themselves sustainable, it didn't work for them. And so from then on, I became really interested in being like one step away from the front line in administration and then ultimately in fundraising. And so I spent many years in homeless services in fundraising in Skid Row in Los Angeles and worked for several agencies. And then eventually, about 15 years ago, came onto the consulting side because someone suggested it. They're like, you're really good at this. You could do this for many different agencies at once. And so I got a job as a senior consultant at a consulting firm called Thurlow Associates. That is the firm that I ultimately bought, took over, and then kind of relaunched into what is a larger business now. So that brought me to this side of the aisle about 15 years ago, and I haven't left it since because It's everything I like doing, but for multiple organizations at once. So anytime, any given time, I'm working with homeless service organizations, healthcare organizations, justice reform organizations, arts organizations, doing all of this. And kind of my team's filling those gaps for all those organizations. And 5 years ago, pretty much like to the day, I was thinking about it this morning on my walk. I purchased the firm that I'd worked for 10 years, took it over with four staff members and a small book of business, mostly of which that I actually had brought in myself because I was in charge of business development, and slowly grew it and transformed it into a place that I wanted to work and I wanted to have.
Wow, that's wonderful. I love that. So let's get into you actually taking over
Yeah.
and launching Chic Impact. How did you approach planning? Did you have like a formal business plan? Was it more like intuitive? What was it back then when you first started?
It's a really good question. Yeah, at the time, and this is very intrinsically linked to my personal story. At the time, this was during the pandemic.
Okay.
I was just about to change my entire life. I was actually in the middle of divorce, which luckily all has worked out. I had two young children at the time. And I remember that the timing of it all had to work, that I basically, my divorce was finalized. I purchased my house off my ex-husband and purchased this business all in a course of 2 weeks. And
Wow.
I had $400 in my bank as a single mom. And it was
Ooh.
all quite scary. And though it kind of felt at the time, because I loved the business so much and I had this opportunity to take it off of the founder who was my mentor, is my mentor, and someone I respect so much, that I always had these ideas of how we could grow it and how we could do more with what we were experts at. And so I think I spent years and years creating kind of an intuitive based business plan. And then I, through some version of survival, had to execute it. And there really wasn't a backup plan, which I think is probably part and parcel of the success, as well as the team that came with me and the clients.
Yeah.
All of them came with me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's true. I think I've been having you're probably the fourth or fifth conversation that I'm having with now that it's really, really relevant how obstacles or seemingly presented challenges in life have actually turned out to be that one kind of pivotal moment that opens up, where they are today or, some opportunity that they never would have had they not faced that. So I think I'm hearing that same theme in there. And let's go along. I like what you said because I have a background in nonprofit. I worked in the nonprofit sector for 10 years. So when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to circle back to that. In your experience working with nonprofits, what are the most common, well, I'm going to say planning mistakes because we were talking about planning, but just, I mean, just the things that you see that they either founders or leaders within that nonprofit are making.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest issues is not planning enough and or planning too far down the road. Like when we do strategic plans for organizations, I think the sweet spot is like 2 to 3 years of a plan. A 5 year plan is you're taking a lot of time planning on something that you've no idea the variables for. So it's that. And also, I think nonprofits just by the way they work in a scarcity mindset, and we've fostered that. I mean, that's because of the way nonprofits are set up, how they have to raise resources, the way we think of nonprofits. I mean, even just the phrase nonprofit, we know that the ROI at the end of the day is not profit, but a nonprofit has to be somewhat profitable, or at least run in the black, to keep lights on and to ensure their mission can be met. And so it's a combination of many of these things. And one of the little things we do is we have this beautiful office space. We have two beautiful office spaces. But one of the reasons I got this large office space in the middle of the pandemic was our nonprofits don't really have access to beautiful professional spaces a lot. And this has been my approach with the business in general. It's like, well, what if we modeled the behavior and we provided the resource and or the place that felt a little more abundant for nonprofits to practice and build capacity in. So I think it's a combination of many of those things, but planning, but also feeling like there's choices and abundance and sustainability to it all. A lot of us are
I
operating that without that.
I think that's a wonderful approach is leading with you know, just show it by leadership. You're going to model the behavior. I like that a lot. And you work with organizations through growth phases, right? Big campaigns, leadership transitions. What are the key pillars of a strong, actionable business plan, especially in that nonprofit sector?
So understanding what you can and can't control, I think is really important. A lot of nonprofits, I think are really kind of doing it from a dream state of if these are all the things we could do if we got everything we ever asked for, and it's typically not that. This is not how it works, right? Another thing that I see a lot as something that holds nonprofits back is just the idea that they have to continually grow to be impactful. And especially right now in this funding environment where we're seeing really large shifts in federal, state, county, city, and philanthropic funding, I am not popular, but this is for business as well. There are times where we have to maintain and or scale down a bit in order to be sustainable long term. And much like you talked about just a little bit ago, that constraints foster creativity. We see this in the nonprofit sector as well, and I want us to see it more as an opportunity and less as something happening to us that we can't control. But like, let's dig in now and let's see like what opportunity is this giving us?
Yeah. So you talked about like the 3 to 5 year target
Yeah.
in planning. What does long-term planning look like for you now as a more established business? I mean, do you use annual planning cycles,
Yeah.
that 3 to 5 year strategy that you talked about, or something else entirely?
So that's changed over the last 5 years because when I first took the business over, so we've pretty much steadily grown about 20% each year, both in
Wow.
revenue, profit, and team. So when I took over, we were a 4-person team. We're now a 21-person team 5 years in. And same with profit and revenue has grown pretty much that steady state and not terribly planned at first, to be honest. It was more that if we could focus on doing really good work and working with great clients, we will grow as the work grows. This is probably this last year, 2025 was the first year that I purposefully invested in overstaffing us so that I could brace for the growth rather than respond to the growth kind of in arrears. And that's typically how we grew because it's a service based organization, corporation that I run. So we work off billable hours and retainers. And so it was risky and it was really scary, but it's already started to pay off. And it gave us this, it was a mental shift for us too, from working in the like, we're just going to make it work and we're going to stretch every day zone to we have more people than we have business for a while. And so we're actually going to take some time and do some internal strategic planning. And we're going to turn the expertise of our staff on ourselves. So we did internal committees. We started to look at what we as a business are struggling with or have struggled with. And it's like, I'm not the one to solve all of this. So our staff is starting to solve it and come up with ideas for it too. And we have that space.
What I like that you said the most is how you made an intentional strategic decision. But that came over, I mean, you've been established for 5 years. There were some dues that you had to pay, right? I mean, you
Absolutely.
said obviously you were in the lagging side of things and reactionary for a while, and I think by design that's fair. But I like that you said that because a lot of the goals that we have every single day in what we do for our services is trying to get the owner and the leadership to shift from being reactive to proactive. And it sounds like you had to make that shift as well and do that with your team. And I think what that really entailed is focusing on the strategy, on the planning, on looking at where you want to go so that you can make that decision now with where you're at. And I think we see a lot of founders that are very overwhelmed by the thought of that.
Mm.
So where would you say, because you just talked about how you did it, and I know we're just having a conversation, so it sounds like, oh yeah, we just decided to do this, and I'm sure it wasn't like that for you guys, and it was very intentional, like you said, very scary, and there were risks. So where should somebody start? Where do you guys start when you're working with, your leaders and your
Yeah.
nonprofits? Where do you start? What is step one?
Well, one thing I think that's really helped me is I use this phrase a lot with my clients, and I have to remember it, is like break up with your own story. You need to break up with your own story to move forward. And the problems and challenges, let's just say challenges that I had 5 years ago when taking over this business in that first year are not the ones I have today. And I have to remind myself that the same way I have to reinvent my plans for the business, I have to reinvent what I'm worrying about too. And I know that sounds strange, but wait, like you're a business owner, or anyone listening to this who's a business owner in leadership at any kind of company, you're constantly worried about something. It's something, right? But that has to change, and you have to allow that to change as your business grows or changes. And I think that's the scary part sometimes, is knowing that what I worried about 5 years ago is not what I'm worried about now, and that's good. And I need to shift my plans and strategies to meet that. But for me, the biggest strategy that maybe has helped with that is even as a mom who's so busy, I check out um, like a couple times a year, usually quarterly, like fully check out for a couple days, usually on a weekend. I get real quiet. I don't take anyone with me because even if my partner's with me or my kids, I'm going to think about someone else. But like I just get quiet. And usually what surfaces in that time is like a better, more like real version of what we're challenged with and what the opportunities are. That's really hard to do when you're in the middle of running a business, but that practice has probably been one of the most transformative things for me.
That's wonderful. I was just talking to my mom last night and she was saying how she got away she's like, in her 70s. And she's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I just needed some time to have my own retreat. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what, mom? Like, that's great. And so what I'm hearing is if you're in that leadership space, you're making a lot of decisions. It's your job to cast vision for your company. It's your job to make a lot of those decisions. Then you need to, step one, plan time to
Yeah.
plan.
Oh yeah.
Plan time to strategize about how to fulfill your vision or, anything like that. Because, and I think that's really good advice because it's not going to be the overflow of the day. It has to actually be, if you want to be intentional about decision making, then you need to be intentional about planning time to make those decisions. And so I think that's really, really good advice. I think I'm going to stop there because that's if anybody has one takeaway, one thing that they take from this, it
Yeah.
is make time to really strategize on how you're going to fulfill that mission and vision in your company. And that's really great. So we do have one signature question, Amber, that we
Okay.
ask everybody. This podcast is called Business Owners Tell All. So tell us, what does it take to sit in that seat, to make those kind of decisions, to plan and make time to plan? If you're sitting in there and you're giving someone advice, what would you say that is?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if this is a gendered response, so I want to call that out too. But as a female leader, I had to really learn to not take things as personally. That the company, even though it is my company, it isn't me. And I had to make sure that my identity was both separate and intertwined with it. Um, but it's something I struggle with. I think it's something a lot of leaders struggle with. And over time, the muscle has gotten stronger, but I think it's helped me make decisions on behalf of my team and the organization, not on behalf of me.
That's
So that
wonderful.
shift, yeah, and that shift honestly has allowed a lot of this growth. Like it's way easier to take time off and go listen and know that you need to get quiet to move forward. If you're like, well, yeah, because my company benefits from this. I come back from those retreats and give promotions usually because I'm like, oh my God, I hadn't even thought of that. We've been so in the weeds. I didn't even think that you should be doing something else. And so I think it's taking the job seriously. Part of that is separating yourself from it too a bit.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's really hard. The identity thing is a very real thing that a lot of founders have, I believe. And especially when we have our names on the company, right? Our actual identity is wrapped up in it. At the same time, it is not us. We do, and I think the bigger thing too is like we get to decide.
Yeah.
It is our name on the company. It is our whole mission, like what we decided to get into work to do. We are allowed to break up with our old story or change the direction of somewhere, where we're going or doing something. So Amber, thank you so much for bringing your whole self to this conversation. I think I can absolutely see that. Like, if you're a listener, I think maybe I'm just identifying a lot because we have very
Yeah.
parallel stories and there's a lot of connections there. And every time you were saying something like, oh yeah, that's my girl. Like that's exactly what I think. So your business mind, your public leadership, your story as a first generation founder, female, your heart for your community. I think you've shown us that planning isn't just about numbers and forecasts, which is definitely a big part of it, but it's about being intentional with your
Mhm.
mission, with your team, with your impact, all that kind of stuff. So if you're listening and you want to learn more about Amber's work or get connected if you're in the LA area, if you have a nonprofit, need help in those areas, and you want to get a hold of her, Amber, how can people find you?
Yeah, best way is our website, chikimpact.com. And we work with nonprofits of all size. We also do something called Impact Academy, which is basically all the things we do for larger and mid-sized nonprofits, but in like a cohort setting for groups of small nonprofits. And I feel like it's like all of our secret sauce and our tools at once for organizations that maybe couldn't afford to work with us in a larger way. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, go to the website, find us on Facebook or LinkedIn.
I love that. And I kind of like that idea for us too.
Yeah.
Smaller businesses that maybe aren't quite ready for
Yeah.
fractional services and bringing in a company like you or me and having those resources. Because I really believe in that, like the hand up. And I had to get to a certain point and I didn't do it without help, right? And so
Yeah.
it's getting the information out there, helping to people, empower them. And I love that. So, our listeners, if this episode inspired you, like it's already inspired me, I feel like I've got some action steps walking away from this conversation with Amber. But uh, please, if you're ready to and inspired to take your business planning seriously or step into a bigger leadership role into your own community, go ahead and hit follow, share this episode with a friend who needs to hear it. And always thanks for tuning in to Owners Tell All. This is what it takes, and we will catch you next time. Would you or someone you know like to be featured on this podcast? Our applications are now open. Apply today at seekersolution.com and click on the podcast link to get started.